The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome to the webinar. This is Joe, and we're so excited to have you here with us today. We're going to be talking about tools and tactics for test taking. Try and say that 5 times fast. Today I have with me Dr. Amy Jauman. Amy, I'd love for you to introduce yourself, please.
Good afternoon, everybody, or morning if you're listening to the recording. As Joe said, my name is Amy Jauman. I am the Chief Learning Officer for the National Institute for Social Media. So we provide a certification exam for social media and marketing professionals. I'm also an author. I authored the NISM textbook as well as a book specifically designed to help people tap into their unique skills and create a prep plan that matches very nicely with their own environment and the way they like to absorb info. So really excited to be here today. I, of course, know Jo through the National Institute for Social Media. She is one of our fantastic educators, which she will, I'm sure, tell you more about, but specializing in working with our nonprofit sector, which is hands down her area of expertise.
Thank you so much, Amy. And I will give you guys a little bit about me. I'm Jo Miller, as Amy said, and I am a certified grant professional and social media strategist. I'm a national speaker, trainer. I founded Smarty Grants and the Smarty Learning Institute. I'm the president of the Grant Professionals Association. I've been working for 20 plus years in providing grants, organizational development, and communication services to nonprofits and government agencies. And as Amy mentioned, I'm a certified social media strategist and trainer through the National Institute for Social Media. My focus is the nonprofit sector, and that's what that hashtag NISM for good stands for. The other hashtag I have down here on the bottom is Earn GPC, and that is that grant professional certification. Two things that are my passion that I hold myself and I also help people with. So that's a little bit about us. I wanted to give you guys a little more information about what we're doing here and how to use the communication with us. We are going to be using that chat box. If you look over to the side onto your right, you should be able to see some options and to use that chat. If you have a question, please use that chat box for us. We'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. I see that Amy's just used the chat box, said hello to everyone. And so if you have anything that you want us to talk about, let us know. Feel free to put your questions in there at any time during the webinar, and we'll address them during the question and answer period. Or if we have time and it's appropriate and we see it in time, we'll answer it throughout the question and answer and throughout our presentation. So let's talk a little bit about why we're here today. We just went back. There we go.
Get a little overexcited there with the clicker.
I did. Maybe I have webinar anxiety. It's a real thing. So today you guys are here with us because you've probably experienced test anxiety in some form or at some level. You know, each person here is going to have a different yet very relatable experience with test anxiety. So you might feel like you're the only one that feels that kind of anxiety, especially when you're in the midst of it, but you're not. The reality is that it is perfectly normal to feel nervous and to have a sense of anxiety and apprehension about a test. You know, tests are stressful, and often we have a lot riding on these tests, right? On the results of the tests we take, on preparing for the test. So you may feel a little overwhelmed. And sometimes you may even feel kind of paralyzing, near paralyzing fear about taking a test. And it's that kind of anxiety that can really impact your ability to study, to prepare for an exam, even to get yourself motivated to register for an exam, and certainly to perform during the exam or even show up for a scheduled test. So test anxiety is a psychological condition in which a person will experience severe anxiety and distress in situations involving testing. And most often, test anxiety is related to performance anxiety. A person has the skills, they have the knowledge to excel in a test or in a performing situation, but their exaggerated anxiety impairs their performance. So ultimately creating more anxiety for subsequent testing and performance situations. So what we want to talk about here today are some steps, some tools to really acknowledge that we all have these feelings to one degree or another over time, and what we can do about it to support each other and to make sure that we're able to move forward in achieving our goals.
So one kind of logical place to start when we talk about test anxiety and really start to dig in is just a high-level overview of what exactly causes us to have test anxiety. So it's never the same for anyone, and different people can have multiple sources of anxiety. So I'm just going to give you a couple to think about just really briefly, and then Joe and I are each going to talk about experiences that we've had with different candidates in our work, and some of what they have shared with us for solutions and kind of some of those outcomes. But here's just a few things to think about. So a really popular cause of test anxiety is, of course, a fear of failure. Like Joe said, this is very normal. If you weren't afraid of failing, it would probably mean that the test you were taking was not particularly valuable, right? Because if there's no fear of failing, it would mean that everybody passes it, and so there's kind of a natural built-in. It's good to be anxious because it means you're undertaking something of value, maybe something that is going to set you apart in your particular field of study. It's good to have that little bit of a fear of failure because it means it's something challenging. And the only other thing I could think of why you wouldn't be afraid of failing would be like if you were somehow cheating or something. So I mean, none of that is good. Fear of failure is a good thing unless it becomes paralyzing, as Joe already mentioned. So it's finding that healthy balance. There's also a pretty common bubble up of anxiety that comes with a lack of preparation. So different people sometimes approach tests and they either really don't prepare enough or they believe they have not prepared enough. And those oftentimes will have kind of different outcomes, but they cause the same kinds of anxiety. Somewhere along the line, you had a plan that you did not execute. And so now you're walking in on test day and you have that absence of the preparation you were hoping for. So on top of not then having prepared like you wanted to, you also have this heightened anxiety. Of course, we all carry with us our past experiences. So a poor test history can also be the source of test anxiety. When I used to teach, boy, this was a long time ago. I used to teach a math class, and it was a basics math class, and it's kind of an interesting experience because people coming into this college that I taught at, if they didn't pass the entrance exam to a high enough percentage, they had to take my class. So if you can imagine the first day of class, let me tell you, nobody wanted to be there. Not only was it a subject they didn't like, but they essentially flunked a test, so they had bad feelings anyway. So we always got off to an interesting start. But one of the things I always asked them was, hey, share kind of some of what your concerns are. And let me tell you, the history that people shared about their experience in education, test taking, public speaking, asking questions, experiences that they had with past educators, embarrassment that they may have had when they were children or young adults, all of those things stay with us. And even if we aren't consciously processing them, they're oftentimes kind of hanging out in the background. And this might be a time to consider addressing some of those and at least being aware of them. And then there's also the kind of last one for you to noodle on is negative feedback in your environment. And actually one of the examples we have today, actually a couple of them I think will talk about this, but occasionally we have some kind of negativity around our test that is in our environment and we don't always address it head on. So for example, you might have a spouse that is not supportive of you taking the exam, or you might have a boss who is afraid that if you pass your exam, you're going to leave your job. So they are giving you a really hard time about it and they're pretending to tease you, but it's really mean-spirited. There are all of these little things that can be happening in our environment. And sometimes the very, survivalist kind of mode is to just ignore it or to work around it instead of addressing it. And that can slowly chip away at our confidence and then increase our test anxiety. So on our next slide, we're going to actually talk through some of the most common symptoms of test anxiety, and they fall into 3 categories: physical, emotional, and what's most commonly probably called cognitive, but it would also be considered behavioral. So this is kind of some feedback from the Anxiety and Depression Association of America. And I say that, I feel like I'm name dropping, but I'm name dropping because it's important to realize that this isn't imagined. It is different again for everybody. But these kind of 3 categories, these physical symptoms of people having a headache, shortness of breath, feeling lightheaded, this is a manifestation of this test anxiety that isn't appropriately managed. And as Joe alluded to earlier, that little bit of test anxiety is a good thing. It keeps us, on our game. We have heightened awareness, that's kind of normal. But when we start having these other symptoms, as you can imagine, you're going in to already take this very challenging exam. And now you're also having to battle the fact that you can only see out of one eye because you've got a blinding headache, and all of those things that we want to address early on so they're not distracting you from your exam. Now, the emotional symptoms, maybe kind of some inexplicable anger or fear, kind of being pre-disappointed in your results, just going over the top and feeling overly emotional. I always think of the old joke when you're talking to a significant other and they say, well, if you don't know why I'm mad, then I'm not going to tell you. It's those kinds of conversations where you might be a little more snappish or kind of lashing out at people and you don't really know why. That is one of the symptoms of anxiety. And a lot of times when people have that and they go in and they take their test, and after they complete their exam, they step out and they are the happiest person in the world. Like they go from the lowest low to the highest high, because all of that anxiety is released. And it is oftentimes only then that they look back and they think, oh my goodness, I wonder if I'm even going to be allowed back in my home tonight. I've been such a horrid person for the last 24 hours. And then this last one, these cognitive symptoms, is tied to having trouble focusing or those excessive negative thoughts. This is really counterproductive in a certification exam environment where you need to be performing at your best. I know it sounds kind of silly and like I'm stating the obvious here, but this is why we're addressing these, because think about it. You're taking on something that's very challenging. And if you are going in with these overwhelming feelings that you just know you're going to fail and you can't shut these voices off, it is going to be such a heavy weight on something that's already very challenging for you. It's unnecessary weight that hopefully we can help you out with alleviating today.
Well, Amy, I'm so glad I was on mute because I was laughing at some of your examples there. I have been there, only being able to see out of one eye because of anxiety. And so that was very relatable. And I thank you for sharing that. And as you mentioned, not all test anxiety is bad. Not all performance anxiety is bad. It is perfectly okay to experience some of that anxiety before a test. And in fact, a little apprehension can be helpful. There's this Yerkes' Dawson law that suggests that there's a link between arousal and performance up to a certain point. So, it's first described by psychologists, Yerkes and Dodson, as the name says, and it was discovered that, and don't try this at home, mild electrical shocks could be used to motivate rats to complete a maze, but if the electrical shocks became too strong, the rats would scurry around in random directions to escape. So imagine that when you are overstimulated, you have too much apprehension, you may feel like that rat in the maze, that you're just running around, you're not accomplishing anything, you're not getting anywhere, you're bumping into the dead ends. And I feel like that often happens to us. But sometimes when you have a goal and you have a little anxiety and you have a mission and you're stimulated enough that it brings you some satisfaction, that you're feeling that kind of arousal about, I'm going to get this, I'm going to learn this, I'm going to accomplish things, then that feeds into your success. And that's what we want to talk about here. How do you balance that? What can we do to get you to that point where you have enough apprehension that it helps you with your motivation? but not so much that it's overwhelming. And, we're not going to tell you to be perfectly relaxed before you go in and take a test, because that's just not going to happen. You can't have a little anxiety and apprehension and be fully relaxed. We are going to talk to you about how you can bring that tension down, how you can relax a little bit more so that you can balance this out. And we're going to share tips and tools to help you achieve that optimal level of tension, that optimal level of arousal that helps motivate you, keep you focused on your knowledge building, and keep your attention on the test or studying for peak performance, and to have more positive experiences with test taking, and to get the results that you want, your best results. So each positive experience often will reinforce your ability to manage anxiety for the best outcomes. So let's take a look at a few examples of people who have experienced severe test anxiety, some of their personal causes, and some of the solutions that have worked for them.
All right. So our first example, Joe, that was like a TV interview lead-in. That was fantastic. So our first example, this was a woman that I worked with actually a few years ago. And what happens oftentimes when you're in an educator role is you supply content, but we go a little bit beyond that oftentimes and talk about how to make good choices in your environment and to find needs, figure out how to meet needs that you may have associated with your own particular personal or professional goals, as well as limitations within your environment. So I tend to work. So if you recall at the beginning of the session, I shared I work for the National Institute for Social Media, just like Joe does. And I work with a lot of people who are marketing professionals, which means they're probably a few years into their professional career. This also means that oftentimes they have a family and are established in their job. So these are not people who are just looking for something to do. They are busy people who are already juggling a lot of different things. So when we talk about you in that environment, that busy person already juggling a lot of different things, if you tackle a certification prep and don't make significant smart changes in your environment, what can potentially happen is you think you're preparing for your exam, but you actually aren't. So the woman I was started to tell the story about had kind of set up a prep schedule where for the exam materials where she was reading, just, thick, heavy certification exam content, right? So this isn't like the latest Stephen King novel. This is stuff you have to actually absorb and remember and take notes and all that. She had set up so that she would do her reading before bed. So she did give up a little bit. So instead of staying up and watching the news, she had actually transitioned to catching up on the news the next morning. So she'd go to bed a little bit earlier, but she settled into bed, got all comfy, and would do her reading. And then on the weekends and one time during the week, she would schedule study time at home where she would actually block her calendar and sit down and study. So she had done this for a couple of weeks, and then she shared with me that she had taken a practice exam and she hadn't made the progress that she had hoped. And it was more than just being irritated that she was going to have to study longer. It was an emotional call, and she was very upset because the practice exam that she took, based on how much time she had spent studying, left her feeling like she couldn't do it. Made her feel very defeated. What we eventually discovered, and we'll talk a little bit about how this happened, was that when she was reading materials before she was going to bed, she was exhausted and she wasn't retaining anything. So she was clocking the hours of studying, but nothing was sticking. So it wasn't that she wasn't smart enough. It was that at the time that she was trying to absorb this information, her body and brain just couldn't take it. And then probably the funniest thing that we realized was her scheduled study time that she thought was happening, it wasn't happening. So she would set herself up in her home where her kids were, and they would come and interrupt her. So she would study, I'm doing air quotes, you can't see me, but trust me, study for 2 hours. And inside of that 2 hours, her kids would come in 6 or 7 different times and ask her for different things, or she'd stop for 10 minutes to go make them a snack. And this was a smart woman, but she hadn't made the right choices at the setup. And why this matters the most is because the negative impact was doubled. Not only was she not getting the work done that she needed to get done, she thought it was because she couldn't do it. So it had both a tactical toll on her schedule, and it had an emotional one as well. So we'll take a look at some of the reasons behind it there. So I've got two things for you to ask yourself if this kind of idea resonates with you. The first is this idea of documenting your motivator. So think about why it is that you're studying. And then the next time you have competing priorities, so going to a happy hour after work, or going to your kid's baseball game, or watching a TV show, know that you're always making a choice about how you spend your time. And that does not mean that you always choose to study for your exam. It just means that you're always choosing. So documenting your motivator means that you make the decision to regularly, instead of saying that you don't have time to study, that right now studying is not a priority. So try that on as you take a look at your schedule. And let's take our kids' baseball game as an example. So you're coming home from work, you've got 20 minutes to get to the ballpark, and you think, well, I could go straight home and study. My significant other is at the ball game, so I don't really have to be there. So right now, is studying a priority? And you know what? That answer might be no, it's not a priority. Being at my kid's baseball game is a priority, and off you go. But you make that choice. And the cool thing that will happen is that when you are at getting ready to go to happy hour, or you are wanting to watch a TV show or something like that, and you say, all right, is studying a priority right now? You're going to make that better choice for you and your family. The second one is the Pomodoro technique. Jot that down if you have never heard of it before. Very simply, it's tracking your time. The Pomodoro technique in particular is tracking your time in 25-minute increments. And if that feels overwhelming to you, trust me, you pick up the tactics pretty easily. So you jot down, you hit a timer, literally use a timer. And while that timer is running for 25 minutes, you don't stop whatever it is you're working on. And how that helps you, remember back to our example of the mom that kept getting interrupted, is you teach your family that while that timer is running, mom can't be disturbed. And then you can look back at your schedule and you'll see one of two things. You'll either see, oh, I didn't get as much studying in as I thought I did, right? Because you'll have a more kind of honest assessment, or you'll be able to see chunks of time where you were able to really were really able to study and get focused, and where you might need to make some changes in the future. So that's our first example, and I'm actually going to keep going and share a second example with you before we let Jo share some of her stories. The second example I have to share is actually talking about that unsupportive environment that we alluded to earlier, and I've got two examples of this. And just to be clear, unsupportive environments take a lot of different shapes because we have so many different environments that we are affected by. So the first example, I knew a guy he was in construction management, and he was taking a certification exam, and he happened to have it set up with his family that he was the sole provider. So he had a couple kids at home, he had a wife, and he needed this certification to advance his career. And so he kind of opted to not change his environment at all and to just try to find time to study. And what started to happen, that test anxiety bubbled up in that emotional manifestation that we talked about earlier. And he started becoming really short, particularly with his wife, because that stress was just building up because he wasn't making the progress that he needed. Now, how this actually came out was she put her foot down and basically was like, why are you being such an unbearable troll? Like you're just horrible to be around. What's the deal? And that forced the conversation. Luckily, because that conversation was forced, what they did was they made some different choices. So he thought he had to go it alone. And she said, well, for heaven's sakes, why didn't we talk about this before? You need 6 weeks to study. For those 6 weeks, I'll take care of the lawn chores, no big deal. So you don't have to worry about that. That'll buy you like a couple hours a week. We'll put off one other big project they have been thinking about doing around the house. And they even put their heads together and realized they could spare a couple of vacation days. And he actually set it up so that he took a couple of random afternoons off, and he didn't come home. He went to a library and studied and had that quiet time. So you probably thought unsupportive environment, I was going to say terrible people, right? But in this particular example, the origin of the unsupportive environment was the test taker. He created it for himself. And taking that step back, hopefully some of this might resonate with you, because you might be doing some of this as well. You might be choosing not to involve other people. You might be choosing not to make adjustments. That is, in the end, making your environment more difficult. The second one is environments that are sometimes, whether it's family or siblings or a spouse or whatever it is, sometimes we have relationships with people where we have good-natured teasing, and when we have situations of high stress where there's a lot on the line, where we have real fear associated with something, there are times when it doesn't work, even if that's your normal banter. So there was this husband and wife team that I knew, and she was taking an exam that was very difficult. It was an extremely difficult exam. And on the practice exam, she got an 85%. And she was telling me that her husband was poking fun at her because he had recently taken a different certification exam, which frankly was much less rigorous. Everybody knows the reputations of exams, and not to diminish his accomplishment, but he was saying how he got so much of a higher score and blah, blah, blah. So the interesting piece was, she was telling me this, and I could hear in her voice that even though on some level she knew he wasn't meaning to be hurtful, it was harming her. And she didn't quite know what to do about it, because that was their dynamic. So it was an interesting conversation to have with her, and a little bit of an awkward conversation for her to eventually have with her husband. But it helped because he wasn't trying to be hurtful. He didn't know he was doing any harm. So bringing that to light. So first understanding that about yourself, and then maybe talking to people in your environment if things like that are going on. And again, your environment could be your home environment, your work environment, your extended family. That environment can be anywhere, but just managing that kind of support system and being aware about how you really feel. So with that, we're going to pass it over to, no, we're not, because I forgot. I had very specific steps for you guys. See that smooth recovery I did there? That was not smooth at all. So how do you set up this environment? This actually was a really important piece to wrap up from a tip standpoint. Where people often miss the boat on this is they imply what support they need. So they sit down with their family and they say, all right, dad's going to be taking a really tough exam, so I really need you guys to pitch in extra around here for the next couple of weeks. And everybody goes, oh, okay, yeah, sounds good. But nobody really understands what that means. So remember my first example of, hey, I'll mow the lawn for the next 6 weeks while you're prepping the exam. And it's tactics like that. One of our NISM certification exam test takers, she mentioned in passing once, we were chatting on the phone, and she said, oh yeah, the kids are doing the dishes. That's usually my household task, but while I'm studying for my exam, they offered to take it on. And it was the cutest thing, because it was also very emotionally supportive, because everybody was in that same boat. But the biggest takeaway was, it wasn't, hey, look for ways to help me out, guys. It was tactical. It was, I need you to do this for this period of time, because that's the best way to keep everybody organized and to really help those people who love you support you in ways that are meaningful. So have those purposeful conversations, and seek the support that you do need to be successful. Now I can pass it on to Joe.
Smooth. All right. Well, I love those stories and I love those tactics. I think they're so important, and we may do them without thinking about it, but what we're trying to do with this webinar is make you really think about it and take actionable steps. And again, doing it all with purpose. Speaking of doing it all, This is one of the problems that we see time and time again. Raising my hand is guilty. You may think you can do it all, but not really. You know, this is kind of an undercurrent in each of the problems that we see is that, you know, maybe you're not making enough room in your life for the goals that you have and to really accomplish those goals. So many people who seek to build their professional skills and competencies, they're committed. They're committed to their business, to their organizations, their clients, they volunteer on boards, they mentor others, they serve their communities, and they commit and commit. We are committed to our careers and our home environments and our spiritual organizations. But, you know, I have worked with numerous students who fall into this category. They commit without making room, without making any accommodations, with making no sacrifices. I had a student who, she was pregnant for her first time. She was working full time. She was in an awesome career. Still is in an awesome career. I don't want to say was. She still is. Who decided to add a professional exam prep course and exam 8 weeks before her first baby was due. She also wanted to wrap up all the projects at work, make sure that she set everybody else up to take over, and she wanted to earn this credential before she went on maternity leave so that when she got back, there were more opportunities for her. And, of course, she's remodeling the nursery and having family members scheduling time to come once the baby's coming. So she was getting the house ready for them. So you and I both know something had to give. She was overwhelmed, completely overwhelmed, and it wasn't realistic for her to do all of this. She wasn't making accommodations. She wasn't making sacrifices. She felt like she was making a lot of sacrifices because she felt like she was doing a lot of this for other people. So we did have to come to some questions about that reality. We'll talk about that in a minute. There's another person I know, one of our students, you know, he works 60 hours a week. He's training for a marathon. He volunteers at his church, and he serves as a commissioner for his county. And he and his partner travel about 3 times a year out of the country. He decided to add getting a new credential, but he didn't make any accommodations or even think about it. He just added it onto that pile. Not very clear about how that's going to work or impact his life and others. So I want to let you know that we've all been that person. We try to squeeze it in rather than looking at what we're going to give up temporarily. We make a commitment to preparing for our professional credential, to prepare for a major exam without any accommodations or sacrifices and without that communication with those around us. So what are you willing to give up to make this happen? Because in reality, when we say yes to one thing, we're saying no to something else, whether you plan it or not. And when we don't plan it, when we don't plan our no's, that's when we disappoint others. And that's when we disappoint ourselves. So plan your accommodations. Plan what you're going to do to sacrifice. So let's get proactive about this. Let's proactively make accommodations for your exam preparation and exam taking by taking these steps. Evaluate your commitments. Seriously. Lay it out on a calendar. I hate doing this because then I feel overwhelmed when I see what I've committed to. But lay it out on your calendar. List your work, your education, your home, your hobby, your health, your family, your social, and your volunteer commitments. All of it. Be realistic about the amount of time that you will need to set aside to prepare for your exam and to take your exam. Be realistic about the areas in your life where you can reduce your commitments temporarily. Write it down. And then communicate those accommodations to the people that will be impacted by your accommodations, your family. Amy gave some great examples of communicating that to family and how they respond. Communicate that to your coworkers. You may be needing to take some time away from work, or you may need for them to not interrupt you when you have your headset on and you're taking a webinar. So talk to your clients too. Maybe you're setting aside some time to really advance your skills and your competency that's going to help your clients if you're a business owner, but you're going to be away. You're not going to be as available. Talk to them about that. Be open. It's an opportunity to share with them how invested you are in serving them and in bettering your business. So again, and talk to those places where you volunteer and serve. There may be somebody else that can step up temporarily and in your place and give you that time that you need. So evaluate your commitments, be realistic, and communicate. One of the other things that we see all too often is this negative self-talk. You know, I will never be able to study for the exam. I could never pass that exam. I'm a terrible test taker. I want to earn my credential, but I'm not experienced, not as experienced as other people. I'll freeze up. I'll get lost on the way to the test location. There will be an emergency at work and I won't be able to take my test. I'll lose my money. What if I fail the test? I'll be embarrassed. I can see it now. My boss is mad. My colleagues are consoling me. My family's disappointed. Now, if you're nodding your head or you're feeling like really comfortable with these statements in an odd way, you may have a lot of negative self-talk. You may feel comfortable with your negative self-talk, and we want you to think about that. What are you convincing yourself of? What are you visualizing? Maybe you think you're being a realist, but what you might be is negative. Negative self-talk has the ability to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I want you to stop it now. And that's another reason why we're here, and another reason why Amy and I are both educators and instructors. We love seeing the potential in people and helping them get to their goals. So there are a few steps you can take to switch that negative to a positive. First, schedule some positive self-talk. You know, after you study an element, take a moment to check in with yourself. What have you learned? Say out loud or write it down. I learned that I already knew this element through experience, and I'll do well on this section. Or maybe I learned a new process or a new element that I have not experienced, and my exam prep course is preparing me for the exam and to grow in my career. Bonus. Or the things I studied today, I can apply immediately to my work. I'm not as worried about passing the exam as I was because I see the value that I can already bring into my work situation. There's no failure in that. So visualize your success. That's another key element to help you with your positive self-talk. See yourself getting that certificate in the mail. See yourself walking out of the testing facility with your head held high. What does that feel like? Visualize it. Embrace it. And then plan to be okay. Listen, failures happen. As Amy said earlier, these tests are valuable. They're valuable because they really do take into account that not everybody's going to pass, that not everybody has all the knowledge. You may not pass the whole test. You may not pass an element of the test. Many people fail professional exams. This is quite a pep talk I'm giving you, isn't it? But most fail because they didn't take the steps that you're already learning about today, that we're sharing with you today. And when they do fail, what they have, what can help, is a plan to be okay. We do that with our students in many of our courses. And in fact, in our Grant Professionals course, there's an opportunity to retake the test. We have that before they take their exam. They have that written down. The if this, then that. If I pass my test, great. If I don't pass my test, this is my next step. I go back through, I do the test prep, I write down notes, I go through the areas that I feel like I was weak on, and I schedule that next test. So plan to be okay, even if you don't pass the exam on the first try. All right. So we know that if you don't pass, you might feel a little bit of shame or guilt or regret. But if you think about it ahead of time, you get back on that horse, you get your plan in place, that will help. Also, we're going to be talking about finding your supportive community and finding others that have gone through it. I will tell you, in each of my programs, we have people that have that experience and they have their certifications, and they are fortunately very open about their experiences, their quote unquote failure, how it helped them be stronger in believing in what they can do, why they think they failed, and that they got it. So can you. And you're going to be okay. Now here's another one. The fear of the unknown. You may be afraid to take an exam prep course because you're not sure about how much time it'll take or what it'll be like or if it's a fit for you. You may be afraid of the whole process. You may have a unrealistic fear too. I had this happen. We had a person who was preparing for the exam, and she was very afraid of a lot of things. She was also embarrassed and felt a great deal of shame because she had taken the exam, and she'd done it in a group setting at a conference, at a national conference with a group of peers, but she didn't pass. And she'd had some previous challenges with test taking, and she also had some challenges with preparing and didn't really prepare. So she thought her 15 years plus of experience would cover everything with the test, but she was wrong because it was a generalist exam. And she had some real niche experience where she was an expert in one area, but some real gaps in her experience in another area. So she realized that she needed to study, she needed to find a program that could help her identify her strengths and weaknesses. And she was extremely anxious about going and taking a test at a test site by herself. What would that be like, being all alone this time? So here's some of the things that we did. We enrolled her in our course. She joined our private communities. We have a really supportive Facebook community, private community. We have members, again, that have had that similar experience who reinforce the point that if everyone passed the test the first time, it would not be a valuable credential. So the value of getting the credential is that you have experience and you have a broad knowledge of laws and regulations and ethics and best practices for all types of grants and all types of environments. And obviously we can't all have worked in all types of environments, but gathering that knowledge is part of studying and preparing for the exam. So we also found out, again, that she, in talking, as Amy said, we work with our students. In talking with her, we found out that she was afraid of the testing site and afraid that she'd get lost. And so some of the things that we did were, through our one-on-one coaching, was that we identified that, you know what? You just need to drive to the testing site. You need to meet the proctor. You need to look at the site so that you can physically be there and see yourself there. And that's what she did. And what was really amazing and so much fun is that when she did go to take her test, she drove the test location, didn't get lost. The proctor greeted her by name. They already knew each other, which was wonderful. She knew where the bathroom was. She knew how to communicate her need to take a break, and she knew exactly what equipment she would be using. This was an extra step, and it took a half day for her to accomplish this visit. But for her, it made all the difference in the world. Understand what it is you might be feeling anxiety about and find steps to take care of that. All right? She wasn't alone. Again, she spoke to that proctor. I even contacted the proctor and let her know that, please, be sure to be, she's coming in today, give her a warm greeting. That will make a difference for her. And it truly did. So find your community. If you need some one-on-one coaching to figure out what some of your barriers are, find that. And then, again, practice performance and other elements. So she practiced even going to the test taking. She did do test taking practice tests for the test and a variety of other things, but studied in the group, found ways that met her needs for her. So find your own solutions too, and ask others what's worked for them. So now we're going to talk about some key elements for test taking. Amy? Amy, you may be on mute.
I am totally on mute, and I have always found as an educator, it's more effective to share your message when people can hear you. But I was just rolling right along. You missed a beautiful intro. So
I bet it was amazing.
Key elements for test taking. What Joe and I wanted to wrap up with today was a look at these kind of handful, 7 concepts, just at a little bit higher level, kind of a rapid fire review of specific categories for you to take a look at and reflect on in your own life. So looking at what preparation looks like, how you can develop test taking skills, what you can do. So we're putting action verbs to this. What can you do to maintain a positive attitude? How are you going to stay focused? How are you going to stay healthy, relaxed? How are you going to find support? So we're going to take a look at each one of these in an overview.
Great, thank you. Now, in some ways, being prepared, isn't that what we've been talking about? Isn't that, kind of the base? It's the most obvious element for successful test taking. And for most professional credentials, there is that eligibility exam that you can take to get a sense of your experience and qualifications and whether or not this exam is for you. And beyond that, most exam providers or preparation instructors will offer practice exams as well. Practice exams can give you a sense of your strengths and weaknesses, but those practice exams are the tip of the iceberg. Preparation goes beyond evaluating your experience and current knowledge. For most professional exams, the exam evaluates, again, back to that broad base of knowledge and understanding. And so for most of us, that means that our niche experience or a particular focus within that broad base of knowledge within our profession gives us a lot of great experience and knowledge, and we have gaps in our experience and knowledge. And this is where studying and finding preparation courses can make a huge difference. For example, I'm a certified instructor for NISM, for the Social Media Strategist Exam Preparation course, and I provide that Grant Professionals course for individuals who are developing their skills and competencies in the profession with elements that are geared to support those who are seeking to earn their GPC. And I am a firm believer that preparation isn't a solo practice. Study groups, connecting with others who have attained their credential are keys to success. So therefore, our Grant Professionals course offers a lifetime access and continual updates to our materials and has a private Facebook group that includes weekly discussions about current events and real-life challenges. And with our NISM for Good exam prep for nonprofit social media strategists, we also have a private group that is offered during the course and after they take their course so that we can continue to grow in our experiences and our relationships and our networks. When you sign up for a preparation course and community, keep in mind that you want to give yourself adequate time to digest the information, to really retain the information, so you prepare to prepare. Let me say that again. One of the best ways to be prepared is to prepare to prepare. So be realistic with your time, the time that it'll take for you to prepare for the exam, and to really absorb that information.
So our second consideration is developing good test-taking skills, and this is a very tactical approach to prepping for your exam. So for some people, they love this, right? Because this feels very check the box, like enough of this theory stuff. We can get down to the nitty-gritty of it. And for other people, they get irritated with me anyway, because I talk a lot about developing test-taking skills. And some people think, what, if I know the exam content, it won't be a problem. So I'm just going to focus on the content, and I don't have to worry about anything else. But hopefully some of what you've heard in our conversations today is just how many pieces there are to this formula of passing a certification exam. So about 80% is the content, right? But you've got all these other factors in play: your mental state, your support system, and then how good you are at taking tests. So here's a handful of things that you can try. If you are looking at information and maybe you're memorizing terms or things like that, your practice exams are going to help you identify if you can recall and implement the same information in various scenarios. So for example, if you memorize a term, on the exam, you could have a definition question, right? That could be exactly like what you memorized, but you might also see it in an application format. So practicing taking a test helps you learn how to take the content that you've possibly memorized or applied if it's some kind of a tactical assessment, and see if you can recall it in various forms. So kind of practicing that and developing that skill is helpful. This happens by practicing actually taking tests or practicing even just individual test questions. So you can develop some skills around, if you're looking at multiple choice questions, you can develop some skills around eliminating the answers, the options that you know for sure aren't correct. So you can, if you have to guess, kind of increase the odds. Even practicing understanding a written question is an important skill. I talk to a lot of people who are 10 or 15 years minimum out of a formal classroom setting where they had to take some kind of a test. And you don't necessarily think about it, but that is a skill that you kind of lose when you don't use it. So reading test questions and having to pick from a multiple choice list is something that you can actually hone your skills on. Another thing that I always recommend people do is sit and take a series of test questions so that you can start to experience what's called test fatigue or exam fatigue. So what that refers to, and we see this in certification exams all the time, is it's actually a physical and mental response to the exhaustion that just naturally comes with the stress and recall of information over a long period of time. Now, this is natural, and there's kind of an ebb and flow. A lot of times you'll get like a little boost of energy, you get a little like an adrenaline bump or something like that that'll kind of get you through, but riding those highs and lows isn't something you'll experience if you practice 3 test questions a day. So try sitting through a longer test just to practice that process. Do some research in advance, figure out what you can have in the testing center. Can you have water? Can you have snacks? If you can, do you want water? Do you want snacks? Don't do anything for the first time. Don't even wear a new outfit on your test day. You should try everything before you get to your actual test. Ask if you can take breaks. If you can take breaks, take them. Even if you may not feel like you need it, sometimes being able to stretch your legs can be that kind of physical boost that can help you mentally focus. And then the last tip about developing good test taking skills is ask other people what they did, specifically related to prepping for a certification exam. Sometimes people have little tips and techniques that they can share with you that can be lifesavers.
Excellent. Excellent. One of the key things that you can do is to develop and maintain a positive attitude. So, Amy and I both know you can do this. I can tell you from years of experience with students who struggle with negative self-talk and self-doubt that working with them to develop a positive attitude and offering a supportive community that truly believes that they can do it is often their greatest struggle and the best answer, and one I love taking on. So believe in yourself. Document that belief. Write it down. Post it on your wall if it helps. Some of our students use apps that give them positive cues each day. Some of our students share their self-doubt with our private group and tell us when they've started their prep course. They give us the timeline for their exam, and the troops rally. We mark our calendars, we start posting positive wishes, we reach out days before the exam and ask them if they have any questions, if they want to walk through a practice exercise with us, or if there's something else that we can talk to them about that they weren't aware of, that now that they're getting closer, or simply maybe we need to have a video conference pep fest for them. So find ways and people that help you develop and maintain a positive attitude. Celebrate your progress. If you complete reading materials and a video or exercises in the first module of your prep course, celebrate that. Again, back to having that group, they understand that what you've accomplished. And if you tell them I finished module 1, they will cheer you on. Or maybe you want to create like a thermometer of success, knowing how many modules you're going to do for preparation and what steps you need to take to get to that finish line, to take your exam. Create that visual that tracks your progress and give yourself kudos and celebrations along that path as you reach those milestones.
I'm going to go make a thermometer of success. I just want one. I don't even know what I'm working for, but I'm putting up on my wall. All right, focus. Ironically, because I feel like I'm losing a little focus as I went off the rails a bit there.
There you go.
Focus is unique to the individual. I cannot, and all kinds of brain science backs this up. We used to think the perfect classroom environment looked like X, and more we're finding that simply isn't true. So here's questions for you to ask yourself. When you need to focus, when you need to study, when you need to be uninterrupted, should you be at home or away? So people who have kids and a significant other, Sometimes they will stop at a coffee shop on their way home from work and study for an hour, and then they'll go home, or they'll go into work an hour early. Because when you have, especially if you have young kids, and it's just really hard to explain that you can't be interrupted, or frankly, it's too tempting to spend time with the people that you love, that maybe that just has to be a choice that you make. Figure out if you study best in short periods of time or long periods of time. Again, everyone is different, and as long as you have a cumulative amount of the right amount of time, either approach will work. Does music, this is one people argue about all the time. I can't believe you can study anything with that music playing. Honestly, for some people, the music is helpful. The music will help. Personally, I can't handle when it's dead quiet. I have to have white noise. Otherwise, all the little noises that I hear are too distracting. So I'm the person that plays like thunderstorms and things like that when I really need to focus. And another way that is very effective is simply checklists and rewards. Sometimes certification exams and the progress that we are moving towards with that, it's so big, right? That it feels like we're not making progress and we can't see that end game. So it just becomes hard to stay on track. So give yourself smaller checkpoints and rewards along the way.
That thermometer of success again.
Yes, I knew it resonated for a reason. It was tied to my topic.
Excellent, excellent. So we want you to also learn and practice relaxation techniques. All right. So practice centering. Now I want to go back to something I said way early on in the webinar, is that you cannot be fully relaxed and anxious at the same time. And there is a need for you to have some sense of apprehension and arousal and a little bit of anxiety to keep you motivated and going forward and to really challenge yourself. But you also need to balance that out with some relaxation techniques, especially if you're starting to feel that test anxiety, you're getting some of those symptoms. So practice being centered, become aware of your breathing and learn to slow it down. I'm not talking about taking big, deep breaths. I'm talking about learning to slow your breathing down. That will slow everything else down and help you to calm. Be aware of your body and your tension. If you haven't already, learn how to practice progressive muscle relaxation. Just concentrating on the little parts of your body and slowly relaxing bit by bit your body and relax those muscles. That's going to help you. Relax before you study or relax before taking the exam. Take breaks. As Amy mentioned, even during the test, you may need to take breaks. Use that Pomodoro method for studying, where you do bursts of studying, but then you also take a break. You take a short break. It can help. That's going to help you practice your relaxation. Get in that mode of energy on, relax. Exercise helps with relaxation. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a bit. And then treat yourself to something special once in a while. Your thermometer is full, your success, you've hit a new point. What can you do to treat yourself, to help you relax, to, kind of remember those milestones and keep that positive attitude? Maybe you can get a massage or take time for a relaxing bath or find some other way that really gives you a sense of relaxation. For me, back to that exercise piece, oftentimes if I hit a good milestone, I will say, that's it. I'm leaving my office. I'm leaving my work and I'm going to go get on my bike. And that's relaxing for me. One thing that also helps, lavender. Lavender is known to help with relaxation. We have many students that have taken a little Kleenex in their pocket and had a little lavender on that. When they felt that anxiety come out, they pull out that tissue and that helps. It's something you can bring into that exam room with you. A lot of our students use apps. There's some fantastic apps out there. There's apps that help you, they'll bring you positive thoughts every day and kind of cue that. But I like a couple of apps. I like Insight Timer, Calm, and Headspace for meditation, guided meditation, for some of that music that I like to use when I am studying, that's specifically and scientifically made to help you study and concentrate. And again, those guided meditations. So learn and practice relaxation techniques that work for you. Some of these things will work for you. There may be something I didn't mention that really works for you. Find what works for you. Learn and practice relaxation techniques that can help you be in control when you feel that sense of anxiety bubbling up.
So staying healthy has a couple of different categories. The first is eating well, and that doesn't mean eating, right? That doesn't mean eating everything in sight. It doesn't mean it doesn't mean eating to stay awake. It means eating well, eat good food, make good choices. Stay hydrated. I strongly recommend you avoid the sugary fixes and the big boost kind of drinks. I absolutely forbid you to try one for the first time on exam day. Forbid. I rarely say that, but it's forbidden. Always get enough sleep. Even if you go to bed early and just lay there and you don't feel tired, try some of those relaxation techniques that Joe was talking about. Force yourself to, even if you feel like you can't sleep, rest. Do get exercise. Sometimes as we find room for studying for an exam in our schedule, we take out things that are really important, like even walking 30 minutes a day. Make other choices of things to eliminate, because exercise will not only help you feel better along with eating, but it has a mental impact as well. It'll help you focus more easily. And some things that people forget about is proper lighting. When you're reading or working on a computer, we tend to curl up in a corner or get comfy. And for whatever reason, we forget that our eyes have to work extra hard if they don't have the right support. And similarly, make sure that your desk chair or whatever chair you're sitting in has the proper support so that you can avoid back pain. So another technique or another thing that you will discover with your practice exams is how to sit, or maybe bad posture habits you picked up along the way. All things to consider about getting healthy and staying healthy, and avoiding that temptation of taking shortcuts. Always invest in the long-term healthier choice.
Excellent. And, to that note of you saying, exercise while you're studying, one of the things that I've done is I've recorded myself reading whatever I'm studying, and then I just listen to that while I'm walking. Take a walk outside and listen to it. And so it gives me both types of learning, seeing, writing it down, saying it, and then listening to it while getting exercise. So maybe that could be a solution for somebody out there.
That's a great idea, yeah.
So lastly, we want you to seek and secure support. Talk about your dreams and desires concerning your professional development, and seek support from your loved ones, your friends, your colleagues, your bosses. Amy and I will be there for you. Find your people. As I said before, I firmly believe in building supportive communities that, again, support your efforts, that see you through your goals, and give you a chance after you've reached your goals to build your leadership skills and to continue participation and to support others in achieving their dreams. Find your communities. Find great supportive instructors that are approved by the credentialing organizations. Ask community members why they joined. What did they get out of that community? Why does it fit their style? How has it impacted their progress and their professional experiences? Seek support and get it. So we're going to be providing you with a number of resources. We are going to be giving you this webinar recording. We have a workbook that goes along with it, and a checklist to help you with your test anxiety, but also a professional development strategy checklist. We do have a course coming up for NISM for Good. That course will be starting September 10th. We'll put some links up here in the chat for you. Amy, if you could do that, I'd really appreciate it. We also have a Grant Professionals course. We have a master group that will be starting on September 17th. We'll include that link in our follow-up information. We have some resources from NISM. I highly recommend their bundles, their courses. There's a lot of resources on their website. Amy can provide that too, and a number of different books and other resources that we'll include in the links that we're going to send you following up. So we'd love, if you do have any questions, please feel free to ask us questions now, or to email us or to respond to the email that you'll get from us later on. Either way, Amy and I are both here to support you, to answer any questions that you might have. If you have anything right now, you can add those into our question box or raise your hand.
It's been a pretty quiet chat. I was being very cheerleader-ish, shouting out messages, and so hopefully people got that, felt the sincerity.
I think they do. Well, if you guys need anything from Amy or from myself, please, again, we'll be sending out our contact information. If you don't have it already, know that we're here for you, whether it's about the NISM or the or Smarty Grants or any of our courses or anything else. We are happy to help you and advise you in any way that we can. If you want any connections to the apps or anything that we've mentioned here today, we'll be happy to provide that for you. Amy, as always, it is such a pleasure doing these webinars with you. I just
fun.
adore you. It is fun.
This is our second one. Can you believe it? We're like practically pros at co-facilitating these things.
Getting better and better. I have learned to mute myself while you present. Otherwise, I will interrupt you laughing because you do make me smile. You make me laugh, and you say things that are so relatable. So thank you very much, Amy, for being here and doing this with me. Thank you all for each of you who attended today, and for those of you that are on the recording. Please give us your feedback wherever you see this embedded or wherever you have a comment. Please, we'll be checking those comments and we'll be happy to get back to you at any time. So go out there, get grants, do good for those grant professionals. Go out there, be social, be good, and let us know how we can help you. Thank you for being here today. Thank you, Amy.
Thanks, Joe.